भगवान विचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्य देशतारिणे श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्तवृंद हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे सर्वशास्त्रार्थ पीयूष सर्ववेदैक सत्फल सर्वसिद्धांत रत्नाढ्य सर्वलोकैक प्रद सर्वभागवत प्राण मद्भागवत प्रभो श्री कृष्ण परिवर्तिता परमानंद पाठाय प्रेम वर्षक्षराय सर्वदा सर्वसिद्ध श्री कृष्णाय नमस्तुते मदेक बंधो मत्संगी मद्गुरो मन्महाधना मन्निस्तारक मद्भाग्य मदानंद नमस्तुते साधु साधुतादायिनि तिनीचोच्चताकर आनमंच कदाचिन्मां प्रेम्णा हृत्कण्ठयो स्फुर ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय परशुराम. Okay, today is 1.9.6 to 7 purport from the portion beginning Parashuram or Renuka Sutta up to 1.9.17. Where is that Word document? It didn't open. Still didn't open. Parashuram or Renuka Sutta, the son of Maharshi Jamadagni and Srimati Renuka. Thus he is also known as Renuka Sutta. Sutta means son, so Renuka Sutta means son of Renuka. One thing is, in Vedic civilization, women are celebrated for being mothers. They are not criticized for being mothers. He is one of the powerful incarnations of God, Kshatriya Vaishya incarnation. And he killed the Kshatriya community as a whole 21 times. With the blood of the Kshatriyas, he pleased the souls of his forefathers. Later on, he underwent severe penances at the Mahendra Parvata. After taking the whole earth from the Kshatriyas, he gave it in charity to Kashyapa Muni. Parshuram instructed the Dhanur Veda, or the science of fighting, to Dronacharya because he happened to be a Brahmana. He was present during the coronation of Maharaj Yudhishthira, and he celebrated the function along with other great rishis. Parshuram is so old that he met both Rama and Krishna at different times. He fought with Rama, but he accepted Krishna as a supreme personality of Godhead. He also praised Arjuna when he saw him with Krishna. When Bhishma refused to marry Amba, who wanted to become her husband, Amba met Parshuram, and by her request only, he asked Bhishma Dev to accept her as his wife. Bhishma refused to obey his order, although he was one of the spiritual masters of Bhishma Dev. Parshuram fought with Bhishma Dev because Bhishma neglected his warning. Both of them fought very severely, and at last Parshuram was pleased with Bhishma and gave him the benediction of becoming the greatest fighter in the world. Vasishtha, the great celebrated sage among the Brahmanas, well known as the Brahmarshi Vasishtha Deva, is a prominent figure in both the Ramayana and Mahabharata periods. He celebrated the coronation ceremony of the personality of Godhead, Sri Rama. He was present also on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. He could approach all the higher and lower planets. And his name is also connected with the history of Hiranyakashipu. There was a great tension between him and Vishwamitra, who wanted his Kamadhenu, wish-fulfilling cow. What is that? Yes. Haribol. Why I cannot hear you?
Nobody can hear. His network problem, not his.
My voice is coming.
No, it's breaking.
Okay, I'll put it in chat later.
Fine. Vasishta Muni refused to spare his Kamadhenu. And for this, Vishwamitra killed his 100 sons. As a perfect Brahmana, he tolerated all the taunts of Vishwamitra. Once he tried to commit suicide on account of Vishwamitra's torture, but all his attempts were unsuccessful. He jumped from a hill, but the stones on which he fell became a stack of cotton, and thus he was saved. He jumped into the ocean, but the waves washed him ashore. He jumped into the river, but the river also washed him ashore. Thus, all his suicide attempts were unsuccessful. He is also one of the 7 rishis and the husband of Arundhati, the famous star. Indra Pramada, another celebrated rishi. Trita, one of the 3 sons of Prajapati Gautama. He was the 3rd son, and his other 2 brothers were known as Ekat and Dvita. Literally, it means first, second, third. All the brothers were great sages and strict followers of the principles of religion. By dint of severe penances, they were promoted to Brahmaloka, the planet where Brahmaji lives. Once Tritamuni fell into a well. He was an organizing worker of many sacrifices, and as one of the great sages, he also came to show respect to Bhishmaji at his deathbed. He was one of the 7 sages in the Varuna Loka. He hailed from the western countries of the world. As such, most probably he belonged to the European countries. At that time, the whole world was under one Vedic culture. Ngritsamada, one of the sages of the heavenly kingdom. He was a close friend of Indra, the king of heaven, and was as great as Brihaspati. He used to visit the royal assembly of Maharaj Yudhishthira, and he also visited the place where Bhishmadev breathed his last. Sometimes he explained the glories of Lord Shiva before Maharaj Yudhishthira. He was the son of Vitahavya, and he resembled in features the body of Indra. Sometimes the enemies of Indra mistook him to be Indra and arrested him. He was a great scholar of the Rig Veda, and thus he was highly respected by the Brahmana community. He lived a life of celibacy and was powerful in every respect. Asita, there was a king of the same name, but here in the Asita mentioned is the Asita Devala Rishi, a great powerful sage of the time. He explained to his father 1,500,000 verses from the Mahabharata. He was one of the members in the snake sacrifice of Maharaj Janamejaya. He was also present during the coronation ceremony of Maharaj Yudhishthira along with the other great rishis. He also gave Maharaj Yudhishthira instructions while he was on the Anjana hill. He was also one of the devotees of Lord Shiva, Kakshivan, one of the sons of Gautama Muni, and the father of the great sage Chandak Kaushika. He was one of the members of the parliament of Maharaj Yudhishthira. Atri Muni was a great Brahmana sage and was one of the mental sons of Brahmaji. I have a question here. Didn't Bhishma Dev commit offense by disobeying the orders of his spiritual master by denying to marry Amba? Prabhupada did say that the instruction of the spiritual master to a sinless disciple to get married can be disobeyed. That is the only instruction of the spiritual master that can be disobeyed, provided that disciple is sinless. Why a great Brahmana sage like Vasishta tried to commit suicide? They're out of family life, so you don't understand these things. He had 100 sons and all of them were being killed. So, also did the Lord save him every time he tried committing suicide? Yes, it's of course by the arrangement of Lord Vishnu that he was protected. Yes.
And Prabhu, being perfect Brahmana, so why he fought in this Kurukshetra Yuddha?
Who?
Vasishtha?
Vasishtha didn't fight.
Oh, here we read.
Why would
He was
Vasishtha
present.
fight?
He was present
Saptarshi.
also on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. He was simply present.
He is present. Now he is present. This is Kurukshetra. This is the place. He is present.
And Parshuram, he didn't used to teach to the Kshatriyas. So he taught to Bhishma Dev also. Yeah. Bhishma Dev was Kshatriya. So,
yeah.
So he used to teach the fighting only to Brahmanas. So how he taught to Bhishma Dev?
I forgot. It comes in Mahabharata and I didn't want to.
Oh.
When it is good for me to look into the Mahabharata, then I'll look into the Mahabharata.
Okay.
Atri Muni was a great Brahmana sage and was one of the mental sons of Brahmaji. Brahmaji is so powerful that simply by thinking of a son, you can have it. These sons are known as Manasaputras, mental sons. Out of 7 Manasaputras of Brahmaji, and out of the 7 great Brahmana sages, Atri was one. In his family, the great Prachetas were also born. Atri Muni had 2 Kshatriya sons who became kings. King Arthama is one of them. Atri is counted as one of the 21 Prajapatis. His wife's name was Anasuya, and he helped Maharaj Parikshit in his great sacrifices. Now, these sages, they typically live for a long period of time. A long meaning sometimes longer than the Devas. When you look at the universal arrangement, a person's factual glory can also be seen from one particular angle, how long he lives. Lord Brahma lives for one full lifetime of Brahma. He is his own standard of measurement. Everybody else is calculated in terms of how long they live. In some of the higher worlds, like the Vibhudas, they rule for one Manvantara. I mean, the demigod, administrating demigods, the Lokapalas, there are 8 Lokapalas. And Indra is on top of them. They rule for one Manvantara. But as far as I understand, they would be living longer than that. But then from the Brahmanical portion of the Brahmanda, which is Maharjana, Tapas, Satya, this portion, they live minimum for 1 kalpa, as far as I understand. So there's a whole description there. Some live for 1 kalpa, some live for 2 kalpas, some live for longer than that. Up to when it comes to Brahma, who lives for 1 full life of Brahma. So these sages are, they live for a long period of time. They live for a long period of time. Kaushika, one of the permanent Rishi members in the royal assembly of Maharaj Yudhishthira. He sometimes met Lord Krishna. There are several other sages of the same name. Sudarshana. This wheel, which is accepted by the personality of Godhead, Vishnu or Krishna as a personal weapon, is the most powerful weapon, greater than the Brahmastras or similar other disastrous weapons. The followers of Nimbarkacharya they traditionally they say that this Sudarshana is actually Nimbarka Acharya. Nimbarka is an incarnation of Sudarshana. And this. They point out that see, he was there even at Bhishma Dev's departure. They say out of the four Vaishnava Sampradaya Acharyas, he is the first. This is towards, this actually Kali Yuga had already begun. Kali Yuga actually, if I remember correctly, it began in the middle of the war or something like that, around that time. They specify the exact date. There's a lot of research into when exactly Kali Yuga began. And it is around that time. So it appears that this sage, Nimbarka Acharya, he was there right at that time. In some of the Vedic literatures, it is said that Agnideva, the fire god, presented this weapon to Lord Sri Krishna, but factually, this weapon is eternally carried by the Lord. Agnideva presented this weapon to Krishna in the same way that Rukmini was given by Maharaj Rukma to the Lord. The Lord accepts such presentations from his devotees, even though such presentations are eternally his property. There's an elaborate description of this weapon in the Adi Parva of the Mahabharata. Lord Sri Krishna used this weapon to kill Shishupal, a rival of the Lord. He also killed Shalva by this weapon, and sometimes he wanted his friend Arjuna to use it to kill his enemies. Mahabharata, Virata Parva 56.3. 8. Anyecha Muniyo Brahman, Brahma Ratadayo Mala, Shishye Rupeta Ajatmu, Kashyapangirasadayah. And many others, like Shukadeva Goswami and other purified souls, Kashyapa and Angirasa and others, all accompanied by their respective disciples, arrived there. Oh, to bring my book. What is this verse? 1.9.8. Brahmaratah Shukah Angirasah Brihaspati. Shukadeva Goswami, Brahmarata, the famous son and disciple of Sri Vyasadeva, who taught him first the Mahabharata and then Srimad Bhagavatam. Shukadeva Goswami recited 1,400,000 verses of the Mahabharata in the councils of the Gandharvas, Yakshas, and Rakshasas. And he recited Srimad Bhagavatam for the first time in the presence of Maharaj Parikshit. This edition of Mahabharata is the one meant for the Gandharvas, Yakshas, and Rakshasas. The human edition runs for 1 lakh verses. That is 100,000 verses. There are different versions of Mahabharata. There's one version of, the actual version of Mahabharata is meant for Brahmaloka. Then Vyasadeva abridged it. And the last abridgment is 100,000 verses. He thoroughly studied all the Vedic literatures from his great father. Thus, he was a completely purified soul by dint of his extensive knowledge in the principles of religion. From the Mahabharata, Sabha Parva 4.11, it is understood that he was also present in the royal assembly of Maharaj Yudhishthira and at the fasting of Maharaj Parikshit. As a bona fide disciple of Sri Vyasadeva, he inquired from his father very extensively about religious principles and spiritual values. And his great father also satisfied him by teaching him the yoga system by which one can attain the spiritual kingdom, the difference between fruitive work and empiric knowledge, the ways and means of attaining spiritual realization, the 4 ashramas, namely the student life, the householder's life, the retired life, and the renounced life, the sublime position of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the process of seeing him face to face, the bona fide candidate for receiving knowledge, the consideration of the five elements, the unique position of intelligence, the consciousness of the material nature, and the living entity, the symptoms of the self-realized soul, the working principles of the material body, the symptoms of the influential modes of nature, the tree of perpetual desire and psychic activity. Sometimes he went to the sun planet with the permission of his father and Narada Ji. Descriptions of his travel in space are given in the Shanti Parva of the Mahabharata. At last he attained the transcendental realm. He is known by different names as Araneya, Arani Sutta, Arani, it's not Aruni, Arani Sutta, Vaiyasaki, Vyasatmaja, Kashyapa, one of the Prajapatis, the son of Marichi, and one of the sons-in-law of Prajapati Daksha. He is the father of the gigantic bird Garuda, who was given elephants and tortoises as eatables. He married 13 daughters of Prajapati Daksha, and their names are Aditi, Diti, Danu, Kashtha, Arishta, Surasa, Ila, Muni, Krodha, Vasha, Tamra, Surabhi, Sarama, and Timi. He begot many children, both demigods and demons, by those wives. From his first wife, Aditi, all the 12 Adityas were born. One of them is Vamana, the incarnation of God. This great sage Kashyapa was also present at the time of Arjuna's birth. He received a presentation of the whole world from Parshuram. Later on, he asked Parshuram to go out of the world. His other name is Rishtanemi. He lives in the northern side of the universe. Angirasa. He is the son of Maharshi Angira and is known as Brihaspati, the priest of the demigods. It is said that Dronacharya was his partial incarnation. Shukracharya was the spiritual master of the demons, and Brihaspati challenged him. His son is Kacha, and he delivered the fire weapon first to Bharadwaja Muni. He begot 6 sons like the fire god by his wife Chandramasi, one of the reputed stars. He could travel in space, and therefore he could present himself even in the planets of Brahmaloka and Indraloka. He advised the king of heaven, Indra, about conquering the demons. Once he cursed Indra, who thus had to become a hog on the earth and was unwilling to return to heaven. Such is the power of the attraction of the illusory energy. Even a hog does not wish to part with its earthly possessions in exchange for a heavenly kingdom. He was a religious preceptor of the natives of different planets. 9. Tan sameta mahabhagam upalabhya vasuttamaha pujayamasa dharmagyo deshakala vibhagavit. Bhishmadev, who was the best amongst the 8 Vasus, received and welcomed all the great and powerful rishis who were assembled there, for he knew perfectly all the religious principles according to time and place. Vasuttamaha Bhishmaha Deshakala Vibhagaviditi Uthatum Ashakyatva Shayana eva Manasa Vachacha Bhujayamasit Yabhiprayaha. The word Deshakala Vibhagavit. What is that? Deshakala Vibhagavit. One who knows, literally, one who knows the adjustments of place and time. One who knows perfectly all the religious principles according to time and place. This indicates that even though he was unable to get up with his mind and by his speech, even while he was lying down, he offered his respects. This is the intention behind the usage of this word, Desha Kala Vibhagavit. Expert religionists know perfectly well how to adjust religious principles in terms of time and place. All the great acharyas or religious preachers or reformers of the world executed their mission by adjustment of religious principles in terms of time and place. There are different climates and situations in different parts of the world, and if one has to discharge his duties to preach the message of the Lord, he must be expert in adjusting things in terms of the time and place without compromising the effect. Like doctors, good doctors, expert doctors. They know what should be done in which circumstances, in which circumstance. But nevertheless, they produce the effect instead of an expert doctor. If you don't produce the effect, then it's a waste of time. Bhishma Dev was one of the 12 great authorities in preaching this cult of devotion service. And therefore, he could receive and welcome all the powerful sages assembled there at his deathbed from all parts of the universe. He was certainly unable at that time to welcome and receive them physically because he was neither at his home nor in a normal, healthy condition. But he was quite fit by the activities of his sound mind, and therefore he could utter sweet words with hearty expressions, and all of them were well received. One can perform one's duty by physical work, by mind, and by words. He knew well how to utilize them in the proper place, and therefore there was no difficulty for him to receive them, although physically unfit. What is this question here? Garuda Deva eating elephants and other non-vegetarian things is a little bewildering to me. Now he is in a bird body. Birds are prescribed to eat certain kinds of foodstuffs. They're allowed to eat certain kinds of foodstuffs. How can a pure devotee eat anything other than Vishnu Prasadam? I'm sure he would be offering them to Lord Vishnu before he eats. Is Garudaji present only in the material world or both in spiritual and material? Both in spiritual and material world. It appears that some of the ones in the material world are by Garuda in the spiritual world. 10. Krishnam Chitat Prabhavagya Asinam Jagadishwaram Hridistham Pujayamasa Mayayopatta Vigraham. Lord Shri Krishna is situated in everyone's heart, yet he manifests his transcendental form by his internal potency. This very Lord was sitting before Bhishma Dev, and since Bhishma Dev knew of his glories, he worshipped him duly. Hridistham Santam Puratascha Asinam Pujayamasa. Lord Shri Krishna is situated in the heart, but he was also seated in front of Bhishma. So he was in Bhishma's heart, but he was also present in front of him. Pujayamasa. And Bhishma Dev worshipped Lord Krishna also. The Lord's omnipotency is displayed by his simultaneous presence in every place. He is present always in his eternal abode, Goloka Vrindavan. And still, he is present in everyone's heart and even within every invisible atom. When he manifests his eternal transcendental form in the material world, he does so by his internal potency. The external potency or the material energy has nothing to do with his eternal form. All these truths were known to Sri Bhishma Dev, who worshipped him accordingly. 11. Pandaputran upasinan prashraya prema sangatan abhyachashtanuragastrai. Wait. Astray. Sati sir, not Shiva sir. Here it is. Shiva sir. Why? It might be this also. But anyway, the reading that I have in the printed book in front of me is got Dantya sir, Sati sir. Asrai Andhibhutena Chakshusha. The sons of Maharaj Pandu were sitting silently nearby, overtaken with affection for their dying grandfather. Seeing this, Bhishma Dev congratulated them with feeling. There were tears of ecstasy in his eyes, for he was overwhelmed by love and affection. Upasina Samipe Upavishta. They were seated nearby. Prashrayaha Vinayaha Prema Snehaha Abhyam Sangatan Upasanna. They were humble and affectionate, and they were sitting nearby. They had approached him. Pathantare abhyam avanatam. What is the Pathantara? Prema sannatam. Prema sannatam in place of prashraya prema sannatam. If that reading is accepted, then it means that they had bowed down their heads due to humility and love for him. Abhyachashta, abhyabhashata. They spoke to him. No, he spoke to them. Anuragasraihi, snehashruvihi, jivutena chakshusha, upalakshitaha, radhyetiva. So he saw them. He also spoke to them. When Maharaj Pandu died, his sons were all small children, and naturally, they were brought up under the affection of elderly members of the royal family, specifically by Bhishma Dev. Later on, when the Pandavas were grown up, they were cheated by cunning Duryodhana and company. And Bhishma Dev, although he knew that the Pandavas were innocent and were unnecessarily put into trouble, could not take the side of the Pandavas for political reasons. At the last stage of his life, when Bhishma Dev saw his most exalted grandsons, headed by Maharaj Yudhishthira, sitting very gently at his side, the great warrior grandfather could not check his loving tears, which were automatically flowing from his eyes. He remembered the great tribulation suffered by his most pious grandsons. Certainly, he was the most satisfied man because of Yudhishthira's being enthroned in place of Duryodhana. And thus he began to congratulate them. Can only liberated devotees do this adjustment as per time and place as mentioned in 1.9.9 purport. They do it spotlessly. They do it perfectly. And sadhakas can be expected to make mistakes in this. What should be done if we face a situation where the mind tempts us to adjust things? So we adjust things, we don't get the effect, and we learn. So we may not learn immediately. We may need to suffer some 300 times until we understand, until we accept that, okay, something could be wrong. How to decide if that adjustment is really needed for preaching or just mental concoction? Halena parichiyate, you don't need to be a genius for understanding what works and what doesn't work. It will not work. The expected result will not come. Well, aho kashtam mahonyayam yadyuyam dharmanandana jivitum narhatha klishtam viprad dharma chitashraya. Vishmadev said, oh, what terrible sufferings and what terrible injustices you good souls had to suffer for being the sons of religion personified. When you follow dharma very, very strictly, you are considered a dharma nandana, a beloved son of the personification of dharma. You did not deserve to remain alive under those tribulations, yet you were protected by the Brahmanas, God, and religion. Abhibhashanamaha. The now Suta Goswami is relating what Bhishma Dev told them. He dharmanandanaha. Krishtam yatha bhavati evam jivitum na arhata yuyam iti yad etam aho kashtam jugupsitam. Such a difficult life appears to be most terrible. Aho anyayam chayit. It appears unjust. Yataha, because yuyam vipra dharmaha achyutascha ashrayo yeshante. Because you had taken shelter of dharma, you had taken shelter of Lord Achyuta, and you had taken shelter of the Vipras. For everything, they listen to qualified Brahmanas. All the three they accept. All the three. They accepted the authority of qualified Vipras, and they accepted the authority of Lord Krishna. And on top of it, they made sure it was in the line of Vedic Dharma, as appropriate to their situation. They made sure that all three were accepted, not any two of them, not any one of them. All three of them they had accepted. Maharaj Yudhishthira was disturbed due to the great massacre in the Battle of Kurukshetra. Bhishmadev could understand this, and therefore he spoke first of the terrible sufferings of Maharaj Yudhishthira. He was put into difficulty by injustice only, and the Battle of Kurukshetra was fought just to counteract this injustice. Therefore, we should not regret the great massacre. See, the whole idea was this. Yudhishthira was thinking that him being coronated on the throne is anyaya, is unjust. But Bhishma spoke the exact opposite. He said, him, Yudhishthira, not having been given the throne was anyaya. Him having to suffer so much, that was anyaya. He wanted, therefore, he should not regret the great massacre. He wanted to point out particularly that they were always protected by the Brahmanas, the Lord, and religious principles. As long as they were protected by these three important items, there was no cause of disappointment. Thus, Bhishmadev encouraged Maharaj Yudhishthira to dissipate his despondency. As long as a person is fully in cooperation with the wishes of the Lord, guided by the bona fide Brahmanas and Vaishnavas, and strictly following religious principles, one has no cause for despondency, however trying the circumstances of life. Bhishmadev, as one of the authorities in the line, wanted to impress this point upon the Pandavas. 13. Samstiteti rathe pandav vrithabal prajavadhu yushmat krite bahun kleshan praptato kavati muhu. As far as my daughter-in-law Kunti is concerned, upon the great general Pandu's death, she became a widow with many children, and therefore she suffered greatly. And when you were grown up, you suffered a great deal also because of your actions. Kimcha, moreover, Samtite Mrute, when Pandu died, Kunti Devi became a widow with children, Bala Praja, young children, Bala Praja Putra Yasyasa Madhuscha Iti Dainyam Pradashitam. So she was in a very, very difficult, despondent condition. Tokan Apatyani Tadvati. Small children. Apatya Saha Kleshan Prapta Ityartha. The idea is that he suffered along with her small children. The sufferings of Kunti Devi are doubly lamentable. She suffered greatly because of early widowhood and to get her minor children brought up in the royal family. And when her children were grown up, she continued to suffer because of her son's actions. So her sufferings continued. This means that she was destined to suffer by providence. And this one has to tolerate without being disturbed. Sarvam kala kritam manye bhautam cha yadapriyam sapalo yadvashe loko vayoriva ghanavali. In my opinion, this is all due to inevitable time, under whose control everyone on every planet is carried, just as the clouds are carried by the wind. Kalakritattvena shokam varayati. He now dissipates their anxiety by saying that everything is caused by, all the difficulties were caused by kala, time. Sarvamiti dvabhyam, in 2 verses, beginning with text 14. Bhavatav api yadvashe yasya vashavanti. Anything which is detestable for persons, including you, should be understood to be happening due to inevitable time, the destructive force of time. There is control by time all over the space within the universe, as there is control by time all over the planets. All the big gigantic planets, including the sun, are being controlled by the force of air, as the clouds are carried by the force of air. Similarly, the inevitable kala or time controls even the action of the air and other elements. Everything, therefore, is controlled by the supreme kala, a forceful representative of the Lord within the material world. Thus, Yudhishthira should not be sorry for the inconceivable action of time. Everyone has to bear the actions and reactions of time as long as one is within the conditions of the material world. Yudhishthira should not think that he had committed sins in his previous birth and is suffering the consequence. Even the most pious man has to suffer the condition of material nature. But a pious man is faithful to the Lord, for he is guided by the bona fide Brahmana and Vaishnava, following the religious principles. So this is how a pious person is Viprad Dharmachyut Ashraya. All pious people are Viprad Dharmachyut Ashraya. They listen to Vipras within the boundary of Dharma and in order to please Lord Achyuta. These 3 guiding principles should be the aim of life. One should not be disturbed by the tricks of eternal time. Under no circumstance should we get out of the boundaries of Vedic knowledge which are taught by bona fide Brahmana. Under no circumstances should we get out of the boundaries of Vedic Dharma. Why the Vipras have to come into picture? Because they know how to effectively apply Dharma. Just as we have medical books all over the planet, but still there are doctors whose activities can be verified by competent persons by counter-checking with their textbooks. Like that. Ultimately, one should take shelter of Lord Achyuta, Lord Vishnu. These 3 guiding principles should be the aim of life. One should not be disturbed by the tricks of eternal time. Even the great controller of the universe, Brahmaji, is also under the control of that time. Therefore, one should not grudge being thus controlled by time, despite being a true follower of religious principles. 15. Yatra dharma suto raja kadapanir vikodaraha Krishnos gandivam chapam sukrit Krishnas tato vipat. Oh, how wonderful is the influence of inevitable time. Otherwise, how can there be reverses? In the presence of King Yudhishthira, the son of the demigod controlling religion, Bhima, the great fighter with a club, the great bowman Arjuna with his mighty weapon Gandiva, and above all, the Lord, the direct well-wisher of the Pandavas. Aho durghatana ghatanapatuhu kalaha ityaha yatreti. Oh, look at this. The destructive force of time, Kala, is expert in making the impossible event a possible event. Krishna, Arjuna. Here the word Krishna appears twice. The first instance of Krishna refers to Arjuna. Sometimes Arjuna is referred to as Krishna. Astri, Hanmi, he was the carrier of the weapon. He was the carrier of the bow. Tatas, tatrapi vipat. And despite the presence of these great personalities, still there are calamities. Punya Sharira Balastra Naipunya Shastra Deva Sampattao Piti Arthaha. Despite piety, despite bodily strength, despite expertise in the usage of weapons, despite weapons and demigods and their prosperity, who were all supporting them. Still, as far as the material or spiritual resources were required, there was no scarcity in the case of the Pandavas. Materially, they were well equipped because two great warriors, namely Bhima and Arjuna, were there. Spiritually, the king himself was a symbol of religion. And above all, the personality of Godhead, Lord Sri Krishna, was personally concerned with their affairs as the well-wisher. And yet, there were so many reverses on the side of the Pandavas. Despite the power of pious acts, the power of personalities, the power of expert management, and the power of weapons under the direct supervision of Lord Krishna, the Pandavas suffered so many practical reverses, which can only be explained as due to the influence of Kala, inevitable time. Kala is identical with the Lord himself, and therefore the influence of Kala indicates the inexplicable wish of the Lord himself. There is nothing to be lamented when a matter is beyond the control of any human being. 16. Na khyasya karhichit rajan kuman ved vidhit sitam yad vijigyasaya yukta muhyanti kavyopihi. O king, no one can know the plan of the Lord Sri Krishna. Even though great philosophers inquire exhaustively, they are bewildered. Nanu Krishnam katham kalaha atikrame ityapekshayam aha. Objection. How can time overcome Krishna? The current verse is the response to that objection. Na hyasya Shri Krishnasya iti angulya nirdishati. He points out with his hand, with his finger, to this Lord Shri Krishna. Vidhitsitam kartum ishtam yat yasya vidhitsitasya jigyasaya. No one can know the plan of this personality, Shri Krishna. Even great philosophers inquire with the desire to understand his plan, but they don't succeed. The bewilderment of Maharaj Yudhishthira over his past sinful acts and the resultant sufferings, etc., is completely negated by the great authority Bhishma, one of the 12 authorized persons. So this is a common question that keeps arising in the minds of conditioned souls who are trying to make spiritual progress. When you accept Vedic authority, you have to accept the principle of dharma, which means you don't touch anything which is forbidden. Bare minimum, one has to accept this principle, that one does not touch anything which is sinful or offensive, anything which is forbidden. Vedic dharma itself has got different bhumikas, different platforms, different stages. Karma, jnana, and bhakti. Or if you want to go a little bit further, in further detail, then you would have karma, jnana, yoga, and bhakti. Within all of them, there is no place for engagement in dharma with body or mind or words. It's simply not acceptable. Forbidden activities, simply not acceptable. So when you don't touch forbidden activities, and you engage in these activities, then how can one experience calamities? This question comes up in Ramayana. This question comes up in Mahabharata also. Yudhishthira Maharaj is a symbol of a person who is engaging only within dharma, who's only engaging in activities within dharma, and who's also making progress step by step. But how can he experience so much suffering? The conditioned mind will naturally oppose accepting so many inconveniences and restrictions due to stringently sticking within the boundaries of dharma. So naturally, the mind will generate doubts. Why should I follow dharma? Look, Ramachandra followed dharma and suffered. Yudhishthira followed dharma and suffered. And Yudhishthira himself is thinking that he might be suffering due to his past sinful activities, past life sinful activities, which dharma cannot do anything about. There's so many questions that are in the mind. Is this the reason why I'm suffering? The Pandavas had taken shelter of bona fide Vipras. They had taken shelter of Vedic Dharma. And they had taken shelter of the omnipotent Lord Achyuta. Still, so many calamities they experienced. What is this? Is it the previous karmic reactions that are coming out? There are some even in ISKCON who think like that. Ultimately, it's your horoscope. Whatever you do, ultimately it's your horoscope. You cannot get out of your karma. There are people who think all these things. But Bhishma Dev does not agree. Bhishma wanted to impress upon Maharaj Yudhishthira that since time immemorial, no one, including such demigods as Shiva and Brahma, could ascertain the real plan of the Lord. And so what can we understand about it? It is useless also to inquire about it. Even the exhaustive philosophical inquiries of sages cannot ascertain the plan of the Lord. The best policy is simply to abide by the orders of the Lord without argument. The sufferings of the Pandavas were never due to their past deeds. The Lord had to execute the plan of establishing the kingdom of virtue, and therefore his own devotees suffered temporarily in order to establish the conquest of virtue. Bhishma Deva was certainly satisfied by seeing the triumph of virtue, and he was glad to see King Yudhishthira on the throne, although he himself fought against him. Even a great fighter like Bhishma could not win the battle of Kurukshetra because the Lord wanted to show that vice cannot conquer virtue, regardless of who tries to execute it. So it's not we're not, ultimately speaking, supposed to become personality-based cults. We're meant to follow certain principles. In fact, if you look in the stratification of humanity given by Bhakti-Vinod Thakur, at the lowest level are those who are in Pashu Jivana, Banya Jivana, aboriginal kind of life, like an animal. Higher than that, you find Nirishwaran Naitika Jivana, a life of atheistic morality. Naitika generally means morality, but Naitika also means principle-based. Niti itself means a principle. Just as there are people who follow certain principles, that truthfulness is a principle, I'll never compromise. Or some will say, I need to protect mankind. They can even die for that purpose. These are all principle-based people. So, Nirishwara Naitika means atheistic principle-based. Then one level higher are Seshwara Naitika, theistic principle-based. Then we have the Karmis, Jnanis, and Bhaktas. The Karmis are actually accepting of Vedic authority. They are also theistic. They're originally, as intended, they are meant to accept the authority of Lord Vishnu, who is the one and only Supreme God, taught in the Vedas. And they are supposed to accept the principles. Then higher than that is jnana, where you have all these features, and on top of it, you accept that I should not try to enjoy in material existence. I should seek something higher than that. Then higher than that is the platform of bhakti, which includes all of these features. And on top of it, the idea is to please the Supreme Personality of God. So everywhere you notice that they are meant to be principle-based. Principle-based. So Krishna wanted to show that vice cannot conquer virtue, regardless of who tries to execute it. Principle-based, not personality-based. Bhishmadev was a great devotee of the Lord, but he chose to fight against the Pandavas by the will of the Lord, because the Lord wanted to show that a fighter like Bhishma cannot win on the wrong side. So there's something called right side, and there's something else called wrong side. And you may be even a Mahajana. You may be very dear to Lord Krishna. You may be Krishna Preshthaya Bhutale. You may be that also, which Bhishma certainly was. Still, Bhishma was wrong. And it is Lord Krishna who told Arjuna to shoot, and shoot, and shoot Bhishma. So we don't go by considerations of who is saying. You go with the consideration of whether it is right or wrong. All these 12 Mahajans has been decided. Is there any specific qualification? The 12 Mahajans are the ones who understand Bhagavata Dharma accurately. It will come in 6th canto. You will see that. 17. Tasmadidam Daivatantram Vyavasya Bharatarshava Tasyanuvihito Natha Pahi Prajah Prabhu. O best among the descendants of Bharata, Yudhishthira, I maintain therefore that all this is within the plan of the Lord. Accepting the inconceivable plan of the Lord, you must follow it. You are now the appointed administrative head, and my Lord, you should take care of those subjects who are now rendered helpless. Idam sukha dukkhadi daivatantram ishwaradhinam yavasya nishchitya. So you should understand, should conclude this experience of happiness, external unhappiness, and so on, is under the subordination of the Lord. Tasya Ishwarasya Anuvihitaha Anuvarti san. And you should become a follower of the instructions of that Lord. Kartariktaha Tenatha Kulaparapparagata Swamin. And you should protect these citizens, because you are the Natha. He refers to Yudhishthira as Natha, which indicates that he is meant to be their master and caretaker according to the dynasty. Prabhu Samartha. Oh Lord, he refers to Yudhishthira as Prabhu, oh Prabhu. Prabhu in Sanskrit means Samartha, capable. You're capable of it. Anatha Prajah Pahi. Please protect the citizens who don't have a master and a caretaker. The popular saying is that a housewife teaches the daughter-in-law by teaching the daughter. In proper Vedic civilization, a mother-in-law loves her daughter-in-law more than her own daughter. And therefore, she teaches the daughter-in-law by teaching the daughter. Similarly, the Lord teaches the world by teaching the devotee. The devotee does not have to learn anything new from the Lord, because the Lord teaches a sincere devotee always from within. Whenever, therefore, a show is made to teach the devotee, as in the case of the teachings of the Bhagavad Gita, it is for teaching the less intelligent men. A devotee's duty, therefore, is to ungrudgingly accept tribulations from the Lord as a benediction. The Pandavas were advised by Bhishma Dev to accept the responsibility of administration without hesitation. The poor subjects were without protection due to the battle of Kurukshetra, and they were awaiting the assumption of power by Maharaj Yudhishthira. A pure devotee of the Lord accepts tribulations as favors from the Lord. Since the Lord is absolute, there is no mundane difference between the two. So this is how pure devotees of the Lord, because they're enlightened, they recognize that whatever Krishna gives, I accept it as his absolute favor. Whether it appears to be favorable to my mind or whether it appears to be unfavorable to my mind, I accept it as spiritually favorable to me. They have such deep spiritual maturity. Now I'll look into the Acharya's remarks. So this is eternally slow. Mayayopatta vigraha. Jiva Goswami has remarked, this means that Lord Shri Krishna had, even though he was situated in the hearts, even though Lord Krishna is situated in the hearts of his devotees, and he was also in the heart of, even though he was in the hearts of his devotees, he had presented himself outside of their hearts, simply out of mercy. He had come within the range of their vision. Mayayopatta vigraha has another meaning. Vigraha also means quarrel or dispute. It can mean dispute also. The Supreme Lord, using his Maya, that is the shelter of the three modes of material nature, he had brought about this dispute regarding the correct and incorrect understandings of dharma. There are some who think that this is evidence that Lord Shri Krishna's form is Mayik, is a product of Maya. That is wrong, because the Gopala Tapani Upanishad contradicts that misconception. Tammaikam Govindam Sachidananda Vigraham. Lord Govinda is Sachidananda Vigraham. Also Bhagavatam says, Tvayeva Nitya Sukhabodha Tanavanante. This is Brahma telling Lord Krishna that you are unlimited and your body is filled with eternal bliss and knowledge. Jiva Goswami notes in text 12 that he's actually talking to Sri Yudhishthira with respect. Therefore, he's using the plural forms here. Bhishma consider what is the explanation to this these sufferings experienced by the Pandavas. And he could not see any sinful reaction in them as the reason for their suffering. Not from the current life, not from the past lives also. So he was not able to state that as a reason. And therefore he reflects the understanding of the common people. Sarvam kala kritam manye, everything is due to inevitable time. Now, why doesn't Bhishma Dev directly say this is due to sinful reactions that have begun to fructify, prarabdha papa? Why do you have to say indirectly it is due to kala? So, in response to that, he indicates Yudhishthira is directly the incarnation of dharma. It is well known. If you had to say that dharma itself has sinful reactions to experience, which have already begun to fructify, then how can dharma have the nature of dharma? Therefore, the cause should be accepted as the very greatly powerful, very irresistible, very inconceivable force of time as the cause. Vishnu Chakravarti refers to this third canto verse. Nakar hichin mat parashanta rupe, in which it is very explicitly stated that time will not disturb those who are absorbed in me. So Lord Kapila has clearly stated that the Pandavas, they were fixed in service to Krishna in Dasya Sakhya or Vatsalya Rasas. In the statement of Lord Kapila also, Lord Kapila is talking about exalted devotees of the Lord with love for him. Love for him in different rasas. Yeshamaham Priya, Atma, Sutaha, Sakha, Guru, it should be Atma actually. Guru, Suhrida, Daivam, Ishtam. So then why is it stated here that time has overcome them? So then he then points out that this should be the cause, simply out of a feeling of astonishment. It's not meant to be taken in a literal sense. Madhvacharya has pointed out that when the Lord appears, even though he is not in contact with material existence, and even though he is inexhaustible, even though he cannot be pierced, even though he cannot be dried up, he cannot be attacked, he cannot be shot into, he does not, his body is not filled with blood. Still, Lord Vishnu shows himself like this. And the Lord, he does this to bewilder the asuras and to play with the suras. Skanda Purana. Devotees of the status of Yudhishthira, they are not experiencing their prarabdha. It is very difficult to understand the cause for the sufferings that were externally exhibited by the Pandavas. न खलु भवतां प्रारब्धरचितं शक्यं वक्तुं कृष्णैकान्तिषु तद्वल्लभत्वात्. It is not possible, this Baladev Vidyabhushan, it is not possible to say that all of your sufferings have been created by your prarabdha, the sinful reactions that have begun to fructify. Because you are very dear to Lord Krishna, because you are exclusively focused on Lord Krishna. Tasya papamsha mishratvena tadvati yudhishthire dharmatva virodhan. And if you were to say that Yudhishthira is mixed with a portion of sinful reactions, that would contradict the statement that Yudhishthira was the personification of dharma. Na cha kala rachitam tat krishnanatheshu bhavatsu tad vallabhatvat. Their sufferings were not due to Kala, because they had accepted Lord Shri Krishna as their master, because he is most dear to them and they are most dear to him. This is noted in the Shruti mantra itself. Kala Kalaha. He is the destroyer of the destroyer. Kala Kritam ityatra, Kala Shakti Mata Krishnena ityatra. So when the current series of verses says, Sarvam Kala Kritam Manye, I think everything is due to Kala. It actually means everything is due to Krishna, who possesses the energy of time. Time is his energy. Because in the 10th canto also, there will be a reference to the Supreme Lord as the possessor of time, Swakala Shaktya. Tasmat, Krishnadhinam Bhavatam Kashtam. So the difficulties that were experienced by the Pandavas, they were actually given by Krishna himself. And this will be clear in the prayers of the personified Vedas. But it's very difficult to understand how the Lord executes his plan. One should simply understand that the Lord has a plan for his pure devotees, which may not be understandable to them. But nevertheless, one should follow Lord Sri Krishna, should follow his instructions. And specifically says, you should follow Lord Sri Krishna's instructions and protect the helpless citizens of his kingdom. The Baladev Vidyabhushan notes, Tasmad Vicharad Virattavyam. Just stop contemplating about this. Stop this deliberation. Yateshtam Sakarotu. Let Lord Krishna do whatever he wants to you. Suvritti Prapatistu Karya Ityaha. But you should take up the good activity of surrendering to him. That is pointed out in text 17. Okay, I'll stop with that. Anshadalputrabhyascha Vipasintabhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha.